Hi everyone, I'm Hannah and these are my nuggets of grammar. In today's lesson we'll look at narrative tenses. But what are narrative tenses and why do we need them? A narration is an act of telling a story. Whenever you tell someone about how you spent your holiday, or how you got promoted, or about some problem in your life, or how you met your life partner, it's a narration. Please look at these tenses and decide which tenses are not used if you are sharing some past experience. Of course, they are present tenses. The present perfect and the present perfect continuous, just like any other present tenses, are never used when you are telling a story about what happened to you a while ago. Instead, you need to use the past simple, the past continuous, past perfect, or the past perfect continuous tenses. Only these four tenses are included in a story that took place in the past. Now we'll do an exercise together and we'll see how this rule works. It would be great if you downloaded the exercise and did it first. This exercise also includes the word nightmare. This time it's nightmare over the Atlantic. In this exercise you need to choose the right options. At 11:35 on the 13th of January 2012, British Airways flight BA took off or was taking off from Miami to London. If we say took off, we mean it as a single action, like this. Whereas if I use was taking off, it would mean that I want to present this action as a process. And to understand which tense to use here, I need to continue reading. It flew about 3 hours and was over the Atlantic. So we want to put this action as a fact that it took off and then something else happened to it. In this case, I need the past simple. If I used here the past continuous, it would be like a process, and I would probably mean that while it was taking off, something else was happening or something else happened. It had been flying, it was flying, or it flew for about 3 hours when something happened. Of course, it is the past perfect continuous. It had been flying for 3 hours when something happened. Can I use the past continuous here instead of the past perfect continuous? There was a process flying and it was interrupted. I can't, because the period of time is mentioned here. If we mention that an action had been happening for some time, in this case for 3 hours when another action interrupted it, it is the past perfect continuous tense. However, if we remove the mentioning about the period of time and say just the plane was flying over the Atlantic when a message came out of the loudspeaker, the past continuous would be perfectly correct here. This is an emergency announcement. We may shortly have to make an emergency landing on water, the message said. What happened next was panic, broke out, or was breaking out. Break out means to start. Panic started. Can you say that panic was starting gradually? No, because it happened immediately. People started panicking, so panic broke out. One passenger on the plane said, "My wife and I looked at each other and we feared the worst. We imagined that we were about to crash into the Atlantic. It was awful. Everybody screamed or was screaming." If you say that everybody screamed, you would mean it as a completed action, as if all the passengers at the same time screamed out loud. But no, they were panicking all this time and they were screaming as other events were happening. So you want to put it as a continuous process that everyone was screaming. But about 30 seconds later, the cabin crew started to run up and down the aisle, it means here and there along the aisle, saying that the message was being played or had been played. If you say was being played, which is the past continuous in the passive voice, it would mean that as they were running up and down the aisle, the message was being played all the time, it was in progress. But if you say that the message had been played, it would mean that before they started running here and there, it had been played. Yeah? Remember that the past perfect is used if you mention some actions that had happened before other actions in the past. So before people started panicking and before the cabin crew started running up and down the aisle, the message had been played. So they said that everything was okay. By this time, a lot of passengers were in tears and tried or were trying to get their life jackets out from under their seats. If you say that they tried, you would mean to say that it was a short action, that just they tried. But just imagine the scene that some of them were crying, others were screaming, whereas other ones were trying to get their life jackets out from under their seats, because it probably took them a while to do it. Yeah? It's not that they quickly did it. Another process happening at the same time. Another passenger said, "The captain didn't even say anything about it just until before we started to land, and even then he didn't explain what happened or what had happened." If you say that he didn't explain what happened, it means that after that he didn't explain and something happened next after he didn't explain. But no, what you mean to say is that he didn't explain what had happened. If you mention something that had happened before other actions in the past, you need to use the past perfect tense. Didn't explain what had happened before. It was very traumatic. Everyone was terrified. I can't think of anything worse than being told that your plane is about to crash. It was, or it had been, the worst experience of my life. The main function of the past perfect is to describe some events that had happened before other events in the past. If I say that it had been the worst experience, I would probably mean that it had been the worst experience before something else happened. For example, before I got in a car crash last year, this experience had been the worst experience in my life. So I need to say it was the worst experience of my life. Later, a British Airways spokesman said or had said. If it happened later, then obviously we need to say said. The past simple is used if actions happened one after another. What if I say had said? It would mean that it happened not later, but before some other events in the past. And the story has a lucky ending because that pre-recorded emergency announcement was activated by error. If you have any questions about this exercise, or you want to have another tricky exercise containing mixed tenses explained, please let me know in the comments. Goodbye!